For imaginary numbers, I'll just work through a few questions. Since I is the square root of -1, question number 1, we could write as the square root of -1 times the square root of 4. Normal rule for square roots. And then this just becomes 2, and we have an I. So square root of -4 simplifies into 2I. Similarly, if we have the square root of -27, I'm just going to pull out that -1 and square root of 27. So this is going to be I times 3 root 3, and usually we write 3I root 3. -10, again, the only thing I can do is pull out the I. So that becomes I square root of 10. Whenever you have something raised to a higher power, what I always do is I try to write it as much in terms of I squared as I can. So I to the third is I squared times I, so that's -I. If I have something like I to the fourth, that's even, so I can think of that as I squared squared, which is -1 squared, which is +1. If I have I to the sixth, that's I squared cubed, which is -1 cubed, which I know is -1. So this way I don't really have to remember a whole lot. I to the fifth, I'm going to think of as I to the fourth times I. And I know we've spoken about this before, but this just gives me a positive I. I to the 5,000th, well, I'm going to think of that as I squared to the 2,500, right, which is just -1 to the 2,500. Which 2,500 is an even number, so that's going to give me a +1. And if I have I to the -10th, well, let's see, I'm going to think of that as 1 over I to the 10th, which I'm going to think of as 1 over I squared to the 5th. -1 to the 5th is just -1. And other operations, this is going to give me 6I squared, which I'm then going to write as -6, because I squared is -1. 2I cubed, I'm going to think of as 8I cubed, which it is, but that's going to become 8 times I squared times I, so -8I. And 4I plus 5I is just 9I. And whenever I have a single I leave it like that. Question 13 is a little bit tricky because you're used to just multiplying the insides of square roots. So you might say, is this the square root of 36, which is just 6? Or is this 2I, really, times 3I, which is 6I squared, which is -6. And if we actually read this rule carefully, whoever does that, whoever reads the fine print, we would know that we can only use this rule really if we're multiplying two positive numbers together. So, so there are restrictions on this rule. And the long and short of it is that's not correct, that we really shouldn't be doing that. So the moral of the story is take out the i's first.